going to go ahead and start the recording here. But yeah, the purpose of this is to teach everybody as much stuff as humanly possible so we can create as many possible business partners amongst each other. So this is a do it all for free type of pitch. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right on into it. Again, write down your questions in the chat as well as we go. All right, so what is this? It's teach high density free course that enables everybody and anybody that wants to do it buy multifamily property for $0. This is give value first, and eventually if you are having a nice deal and you're like, hey man, John would be a really cool person to have on the team, that's a little bit of the monetization model on that, right? But it's basically just straight up charity work for my end for the most part. So that is totally fine. I want everybody to be able to go post stuff. And I actually probably don't want to be your first business partner, but I probably want to be your second or third. This is $0. Take everything I've done for free. I'm not charging any money for this. I got a lot of other buddies that run courses and they charge a lot of money, and it's just, I'm not doing that model. And I've spent a lot of time on this slide deck and also intending not so much on the aesthetics, but making sure it's legitimately good, solid content that I actually have the experience to talk about. So you can pay me in 60 seconds feedback at any point in time throughout. Just go to that website right there, $0landlord.com/feedback. All right, a little bit about me. I bought a $250K mobile home park for $335K. Not a big deal, but except for the fact it was 100% seller finance. So that's $0 out of pocket. We fixed all the management issues in 75 days. That means we 3x the net income, and it appraised for $800K 1 year later. So we bought it for $335, and then it appraised for $800K with no money out of pocket. That's over 2x the property, so close to $500,000 gain. We did that 100% remote, never even been there, never will be there. Bought it with 2 other partners, so there's less work for everybody. I have 40% ownership, which is $186K profit on that one property. And I do about $1 or an hour a week, which is a $3,500 an hour rate. So I do a lot of these other properties though. This isn't the only one. But let me just put this in perspective. $3,500 an hour is higher than all of these jobs and these jobs and these jobs. So that's the top 25 in the US combined times 1.5. All right, so just want to let that sink in for a second. That does not mean that I'm making $1 million on that. It means I'm making it very, very efficiently. And I've done this a dozen times, and I spend a lot more than just an hour a week on all the properties across. This is just for one property, and I got a lot of different ones. So I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying that to establish a little bit of credibility, just so you understand this is what I'm going to be teaching. It's how to have a ridiculously high dollar an hour and why you should be doing multifamily investing for $0 as well. If you need to see more, go on to $0 Landlord. I have literally everything that I've ever done on there. That should be very transparent. So if anybody's like, oh, is this guy legit? Yes, I'm literally showing you all my deal history. All right, here's a little bit about me real fast, a little more report stuff before we get into the actual nitty gritty. So I managed $7 billion for the US government. That was my previous job. I started multifamily investing in August 2022, and now I got over 8 figures of stuff. That's 300 units roughly. Almost all of it was for no money out of pocket. So it means zero zip zilch, didn't do anything into it. 100% free shares of equity. And I bought almost all of it in the last year. So that's between August 23 and August 24. And I'm actually one of the top 200 mobile home park buyers in the US, according to basically Mobile Home Park University. Again, go to $0 Landlord if you want to see more. And I've directly partnered with 6 people and gotten them their first rentals for $0 for free. And 4 out of 6 of them now have over 100 units in their first year. So this is not a maybe can I do it, where you guys may be going to make money. Yes, if you are determined on it and you want to do it, I'm never going to sell you a thing. It's literally you can go out and do it. But again, it's a symbiotic relationship. If you guys learn, you guys find a good deal, and you just need an extra set of hands, that's maybe where I come in. There's no catch. Literally just make it together for free. And I actually want a lot of you guys to be working together as well as you learn this stuff. All right. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So that's what we're going to do here. So this is exactly what we're going to look at. I'm going to try my absolute damnedest to stick with these time hacks, but I'm going to get more efficient at this as I pitch it over and over. So let's get right into it. All right, so why do you not want to do single family? Single family is fine, but why not? Why are we not focusing on single family? So it's valued off of the Smith family, right? So the Smith family next door cares a lot about their granite countertops, and it just makes it a lot harder for everybody else. So this group of people right here is dictating your ability to invest and make a lot of money because they care about how it feels, versus the literal rest of the world goes off of everything other than single family homes, goes off of return, which is actually investing, which is what actually matters at the end of the day if you're trying to make money. So I'm not buying an apartment complex to have it for fun. I'm buying it to make money. I care about return at the end of the day. So why multifamily specifically is because rentals are literally always going to be needed. You're never going to have an issue with renting it out versus offices, commercials, industrial, etc. That just sits vacant for a while. And if you don't believe me, go look at a mall, go look at this office complex, go look at COVID with offices. Those just go out the door. So rentals are very, very stable by comparison. So what we're going to cover in this boot camp is anything and everything that covers multifamily rentals. So that's going to be single family portfolios, quadplexes, mobile home parks, which is my specialty, and then apartments as well. So, and mobile home parks are multifamily. They're just C-class multifamily essentially. So you can buy literally everything the exact same way and all gets calculated the same way. And you can actually do this for the rest of the world economy. It also functions the same way, but we're not going to cover any of that in this course. We're just focusing on multifamily. So that's what's defined as multifamily. And I am qualified to say this because I also have apartments and I also have single families. So I'm not just the mobile home park guy, believe it or not. Like I do have a lot of mobile home parks, but I do have other stuff. And I do that because it's value add, because there's a lot of opportunity there, because there's just a lot more ratty rundown parks. This is not a course for mobile home parks. I want to make that really clear. This is a course for anything multifamily because again, it all functions the same, but they're slightly different. We'll get into the nuances. All right, so why do you buy property rather than wholesaling property? And also, by the way, I just want to make sure everybody's on mute here too, just for continuity on my end. So would you trust the sleazy car salesman who's never owned a car in their life? Or would you trust the person who actually fixes cars for a living to spot issues and tell you what the issues are in a car? So that's a wholesaler and that's a landlord. Hopefully this puts it in perspective a little bit, right? Now, you could do both. So if you're a wholesaler who also owns property, then you're going to be a lot more, you're going to be better at your job. You're going to be a lot more trustworthy as well. Hold on, I'm going to mute. There we go. All right. There's Giga Chad. So I'll move that out of the way. So Giga Chad approves, all right? So just do both because you'll be better at both of them. All right, so there's a lot of content I'm running through really fast, but again, that's exactly what I'm going to try to do here is fire hose pitch the entire thing. So what is syndication? It is buying property with partners. That is the simplest definition you can possibly have. It's just you're buying stuff with other people. And it's really meaning that you're buying stuff with somebody that you need something from. That's a better way to put it. So the three main categories that you're going to have when structuring a deal are going to be your general partner shares, and that's going to be the people that do stuff. They're responsible for the property. They don't swing the hammer, but they coordinate who swings the hammer. Right? So it's like running the company, essentially. They pay with their time. They don't pay with money. They pay with their time for their general partner shares, and they get a percent ownership of the property. Then there's limited partner shares. So limited partner shares are 100% passive. They don't do squat. They don't do anything. They are completely hands-off. They pay money, and they get a percent ownership in return. A debt partner, you'll hear the term partner, but they're not actually a partner, is basically just a bank, and then they're going to be lending money, right? So they just lend out money at percent interest. That'd be like your Wells Fargo. That'd be your, anything else that you want. And it is, again, it's a misnomer to say partner because it's not actually a partner. So again, you got your GPs, which are your general partners. They do they do all the work. Limited partners, they do all the funding for the actual ownership of the company. And the debt partner can provide a little bit of debt so you don't have to come out of pocket so much. So GP is the guy who's coordinating everything. LP is sitting on a beach probably, right? The goal is to be an LP at the end of the day, but you need a lot of money to do that. And then the bank just makes all the money in the world. All right, so this is probably a lot. I'm going to put this in perspective here real fast with a hopefully very simple example. So if you are buying a $500K property and it's going to eventually sell for $700K, so it's $200 profit, and the bank is lending $400K, here's exactly what it looks like. The LP is going to fund $100K, which is the down payment. The bank is going to fund the $400K. So now you're able to buy the property, right? Again, you didn't put any money in. You got an LP, a limited partner, to put in the $100K. Then the bank puts in $400K. So you have 20% ownership of the property. Let's just say that's the deal you struck with the LP. If that were the case, then the bank would profit about $40K, and then the LLC, which is you and your LP, they get $260K. So that's the profit basically minus the interest. Hopefully we're tracking so far. So the limited partner is going to get $208K because that's 80% of the profit and 80% of the ownership. Right? Again, the LP right here has $100K in for 80% ownership. So the LP would get 80% of all possible proceeds, which is a $108K return. So it's 108%, right? So that's actually a pretty good deal for the LP. They're doubling their money, assuming it goes 500, 700K. And we'll get into the semantics of that later. You, the general partner, would be getting 52K. So that's the that's the difference between your 260K and your 208K. So you can make money in this equation too, because you're the one doing all the work. So it makes sense for you to be able to do that. And again, I'm going to be teaching everybody here how to be a general partner. That's how to be a $0 landlord, so to speak, i.e. no money out of pocket. And the general partner would then profit a literal infinite return. And that is real estate, all right? So that is the magic of where it happens right there is it is an infinite return at that point because you have no money into the deal and you are simply profiting at the end. All right, so now we're going to get a little bit more ethereal. It's going to be getting a little bit more like business philosophy, but I want to establish these concepts because they're going to come in really important on later lessons, and also hopefully this will just help you on just day-to-day life as you look at some things. And also I'm going to ask everybody to go on mute too, otherwise I'll have to manually mute you. So leverage is put in versus put out. That is it. It is the transit in between. So if I have something that I need, then I can get it by putting something in. Right? And that's kind of like how the economy works as well. It's just everything is leverage. That's the best way to look at it. So we're going to look at a couple different ones. And Alex Hormozi has a very good quote on this. It's literally just what is the difference between what you put in versus what you get out. And Alex Hormozi is like very, very good entrepreneur. If you haven't already seen his content, I'm sure you have. He's the jacked bearded dude that's got acquisition.com. He's like Warren Buffett of the generation. It's awesome. So this I'm taking a couple of points from there as well, but generally this is in line of what he's talking about too. So we got capital leverage as number one. It says using debt. So it's like using money you don't have in order to buy something. So in exchange to get that money, you have to pay interest on that money, for instance. Right? So you're buying stuff when you don't have enough cash. So you use capital leverage. And that's a bank, for instance. Borrow money since you don't have enough. Time leverage. Make your time valuable because somebody else doesn't have the time. Right? So a good example of that would be hiring an employee since you don't have enough time. Right? So you're leveraging off of their time. You're taking the difference in order to get more time or get more money, et cetera, whatever it is you're trying to do. And then finally, there's skill leverage, right? And this is one that people don't really think about a whole lot, but this is using people for what they're good at. So that would be like a plumber, for instance, would be using skill leverage. So if, you might be able to do it yourself, but you might screw it up or it might not be as good of a quality result. And as a result of that, then that's skill leverage. So the plumber makes money off of you using skill leverage, but you're happy to pay it and you're happy to put in for that skill leverage. All right, so this is going to be a little bit more nitty gritty here. I'm just going to explain capital leverage one more time. This is with this is like using like a bank, for instance. So if you're buying a house originally without a bank, no bank whatsoever, just straight up cash. You're buying a house for $100K and you rehab it for $20K. And now it's worth $200K. That'll be $120K out of pocket, which is your buy plus your rehab, right? So $120K into the deal, and then you're going to make an $80K profit because it's $200K on the sale minus everything you put into it. That's a 67% return. Pretty good, right? Most people are getting 8%, 9% stock market. So 67% returns, pretty good in this scenario. Excuse me. If we're using capital leverage, though, it gets a little different. And first, I want you to look on the right side of the screen here. Right, so we got a little equations here. 100K in, 200K materials. After repair values, you're 200, 80K profit. There is no loan, so we're calling it zero. So that's 120K back, or that's 120K out of pocket. And then that's out to minus N, that's going to be 67%. Now if we go and we use a bank as a scenario, this is going to dramatically increase our rate of return because our dollar goes way down, the dollar amount in. So we say 40K out of pocket, right? 10K down instead of buying for 100K. Now we're buying for only 10K, plus the 20K in the rehab, plus 10K for the bank fees because the bank's got to get paid too. So you have less profit, 70K profit instead, but now you have a 175% return. So it is over double, almost triple. So total profit is slightly less, but way more efficient. And you can start to see maybe how a couple of these like leverage concepts will start to stack on each other, which is, again, that's what we're trying to teach here. Now we're going to talk about time leverage. You buy a house for 100K, no financing or anything else. We're just pretending it's just buying it cash, and you rehab it yourself for 6 months. Now it's worth 200K. So 80K profit, 6 months. There's a math right there in case it's hard to follow. If we use time leverage instead, we're going to use somebody else to speed up the time frame, right? We're assuming you could do it, same quality and everything else. It's somebody else can do it a little faster. So they're going to do it in 3 months, and they're going to charge you an extra 10K for the labor. And then you can buy a second house using the exact same contractor. So 70K profit month 1 through 3, 70K profit month 4 through 6. What's the result? 146K in 6 months. So that is a lot better. That is way more money in the same amount of time. So 80K versus 140K in 6 months. So here's a little nice cute graph there. It's green versus red, right? Let's look at that again. Because time leverage just sharpens your curve. So that is your annual percent return will increase with time leverage. And that's exactly what it looks like. Whoops. Also, make sure not to sacrifice quality for time. So if that guy moves too quick, then you're going to end up with this. And it looks like crap. All right, skill leverage. We're almost done with leverage topics, but hopefully this is really, really important. I'm hoping everybody's getting a really good mindset shift out of this, because this is how you scale to get several $1,000 per hour or several $1 million profit out of a deal. So if you're buying 10 million, or if you're buying 10 homes for $1 million, the bank's going to lend 700K. You need 300K, and then you're going to profit 400K. Let's just say those are the numbers. It's going to take you 800 hours total for something like this, just in this scenario. Contractors, management, admin, and finance. In reality, there's a couple more categories in this, but I'm just going to use these 4. Let's just say that you're really good at management contractors, right? These tasks take you literally half the time. So here's what this scenario would look like: is you get 300K funding for 70% equity. That means you're going to be profiting 30%. That's 120K over 3 years, right? I'm just going to let this sit here for a second and make sure everyone's tracking. So you need 300K. So you're going to go to somebody else and you're going to say, hey, I'm going to do a split with you. I'll take 30%, you take 70%. They say yes. Also, remember, you're good at contractors and management. So you can do those in half the time. So it looks like $200 an hour, which is a pretty good rate. So that's 120K profit over 600 hours. Now we're going to look at it if you do it with skill leverage. So you decide to bring on a partner who is literally just twice as good as you at admin and finances. So let's see how they can help out your life. Is they get a better capital raise deal because they can speak finance better. So instead of giving away 70% equity, they decide to be a little more hardball on it, and they say, nope, I know we got a good deal. Let's do 50% equity instead. So that's 100K profit for you guys each, right? So that's before it was 30% equity to the two of y'all as the sweat equity guys. Now it's 50%, right? So improvement there. And then instead of one partner, now there's 2. So out of that, that's a 100K profit each, or before it was 120. So here's some other things your partner ends up doing: is they add an administrative system that is going to save you a lot of time with contractors. They also add some admin verbiage, so that's going to help out with management. And then you end up creating a better management report because you're really good at management stuff. So you say, hey, you know what? Let's do this, and direct them to create better financial reports. So it saves them time with finance too. So you end up working only 155 hours because there's 75 hours from contractors, plus your 80 hours from management. And then you have an average of $645 an hour, right? Before it was $200 an hour. Now it's $645 an hour because that's 100K profit. Yes, it's slightly less money, but that's over 155 hours. Before, you were doing 600 hours. Your partner ends up doing 170 hours. So 70 hours from finance and 100 hours from admin because, again, you helped him out on finance up here. So you made his life easy too. So he ends up working at $588 an hour. So it takes everybody less time because you are incorporating somebody else with skill, and you make more money cumulatively, but slightly less money individually. But you're doing it way, 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 way more efficient, right? Again, it was $200 an hour before, and now you're working at $645 an hour. So it's over 3x. Also, I'm going to request everybody go on mute, otherwise I'll manually mute, and I might not be able to hear your questions. All right, who's a better pilot? This one or this group, right? You get skill leverage by being perceived as better, but then you keep it by actually being better, right? So it's just important to know. So it's like the plumber might give you a really good quote, and you're like, wow, okay, this guy's great. He really does high quality work, but you're going to hire him a second time if he's actually good at his job. So just something to remember about skill leverage. All right, feel free to come off mute in order to answer this. What company is this for? Anybody? Just need one answer. Mint Mobile. And how do you know that? You know the face because of this guy, because he made it, quote unquote good movie. So yes, Ryan Reynolds, exactly. So it's called brand leverage. So you know about Mint Mobile and you want to buy Mint Mobile and you know they're cheap because you know the brand that is Ryan Reynolds. People want to buy his stuff because they know him. Content, or they know his brand rather. You don't personally know Ryan Reynolds, but you still want to buy it anyway. Content, what I'm doing right now is content leverage, right? I don't have to explain all this stuff 1,000 times individually. I can just make a video and then get 1,000 views on it or whatever, right? Relationship, if you know somebody and you're buddies with them, you might get a better deal. And then also info leverage. Info is a little interesting. So if you're, if a house is advertised with a bad roof and a roofer is the guy that buys it, the roofer might know that, hey, it's not actually a bad roof at all. So that's information leverage. It's kind of like skill leverage in a way, but you're just taking what information you do know in order to apply it to a situation and get a better deal. Here's some else. You can do code leverage. So you could run your calculations like this, or you can do it with Google Sheets. You can do process leverage as well. Instead of doing a manual phone call to your granny to get her information, just send them a freaking lease and then have them fill it out, right? Everything I'm telling you, by the way, is how to beat your competition. This is like, if you just implement every single one of these leverage types, then you're going to be crushing it. So that's why it's so important to learn, is because you're losing because you aren't using these things because other people are using them against you. So optimization leverage is if you have a better margin. That's like Walmart, for instance, right? They have a better it's not even like financial leverage because it's just they're more efficient at everything. They have a better staff training policy, even though it's Walmart or whatever. But like they have better systems, they have better pricing, they have better logistics. Everything is optimized comparatively. And then also resource leverage, right? If somebody offers you $100K cash for your house versus $100K with a bank, you're going to take the cash offer. And that's why a lot of wholesalers, for instance, will do cash offers because you just have more resources at that point. All right. Hopefully everybody's learning. I'm going to take a quick pause for a second. If you have not learned anything, congrats. Come off mute and say it. All right. Hopefully everybody's learning something. Otherwise, you can pay me by giving me feedback right here. So, also you can join the email listing community, which obviously you guys are in the community already. And we do stuff on Wednesdays and Tuesdays, and also now soon will be coming up for Thursday. So stay tuned. Keep your notifications on for the channels. Mute the channels that you don't like to get notifications for. So I'm still working on the permissions for Discord. And that's for other servers because I'm putting it in here. So, all right. Here's important stuff. Brass tacks and nuts and bolts. All right. This is the really technical stuff, so I'm going to want everybody to like keep an eyeballs on the page here and really follow along. Whoops. All right, so you have gross operating income. So that's going to be your total annual income from a property. So it's going to be rent, other sources, etc. Right? And that's like the laundromat in the basement or whatever else. It's usually just rent. Your expenses are going to be all the expenses the property incurs. And again, that's the property incurs. So that's going to be like management, for instance, of the property tax on it, not the income tax, the property tax, insurance, maintenance, lawn care, etc. This is not including how you run it necessarily, right? So a property owner's, or this is not the results of it is what I meant to say, my apologies. So somebody's individual income tax does not matter, right? That does not get factored in whatsoever because that's going to vary from person to person. Also, if person A buys the property versus person B buys the property with a loan, it's different. So we are looking at just the property. And also, this is not stuff that the tenants pay for. If the tenants pay for their own internet, then you don't count that. So it's just what are the expenses from the property. So your net operating income, NOI, you're going to see this term a lot, so get used to it, is your net income for the year. So it's your GOI minus your expense per year. And NOI and GOI, if you see those, they're by default always going to be an annual unless it's specified otherwise. It might literally say per month or whatever else. But generally speaking, it will be by default annual. All right, OPEX and cash flow. So OPEX, and by the way, all these slides are available later on. I'll be publishing them out here. So OPEX is your expenses divided by gross. So that is basically like a reverse profit margin, right? So it's how much are you losing by operating the property. So that's typically going to be like 20 to 50% for real estate. Businesses, for instance, have like a much higher operating expense. So again, it's like your reverse profit margin. So if I have a $10,000 a year income and I spend $3,000 a year on expenses like taxes or whatever, then like property tax that is, then that is a 30% OPEX, right? Because 3K divided by 10K. Your cash flow is going to be your net income for the year minus your mortgage payments for the year, right? And that's like the actual straight up cash flow you're finally getting after everything's done. Yeah, you finally got some cash flow of the property. And that is just principal and interest. Does anybody know why? I'm going to open it up for people to come off mute if they want. Any guesses? All right. It's because tax and insurance are already accounted for. That's why. Right? Because we already talked about that a second ago in expenses. All right. Here's what else we got. So here's an example where we're going to be calculating everything out. So if we have the following here, property rents, 1,000, taxes, 300, etc. You can read the slide. What is included in NOI? I'm going to open up to the crowd here. Bueller, anybody? What's on the slide here, man? What? Right. Well, you almost got everything right. But again, catchy on here. So it said expense by the tenant, right? So it's water is $100 a month paid by the tenant. So you don't count that because the tenant pays for it. Also, the mortgage you do not count for. So it's the rent would be incorporated in your NOI, your taxes, your management, your insurance, whatever else is paid by the landlord. Also, I have a clerical error there. I apologize. That the box is not supposed to be on the sewer, so ignore that. Yeah, so that's what our gross per year is going to be, $12,000, and then we can see how we calculate out our expense per year. Notice for sewer that's a 0, so that's again my bad on the error. And this is what the equations look like on the right. So this is hopefully everybody can do this level of math. There's literally just addition, subtraction, division. That's it. So our NOI is our gross minus our expense. That's just saying what is our net income for the year. Our OPEX is the ratio of the two between our expenses and our gross. So it's saying I spend 27% of the income is spent on stuff. And then the cash flow is everything that is the net income minus the mortgage payment. So that's the amount of money I can actually put in my pocket is the cash flow. So those are the big three there, NY, OPEX, and cash flow. So OPEX is useful in case it is, 70%, then you might know that it is very, very, you're spending too much money on it basically. So. And Jordan, can you mute? All right, price versus value. Price is what you pay for. Value is what it's worth. Also known as what you are selling it for, because fair market value is how much something is people are willing to pay, and something is only worth what you can sell it for. So make sure to stay very realistic when you are actually determining value. Good example is if an unsold house is listed for $100K, it's probably not worth $100K, because if it was a screaming deal, then it would have already been sold off the market. So make sure to negotiate when you're looking at properties, because people buy when the value is greater than the price. So if I feel that the property is worth $110K, but I can get it for a steal of a deal at only $100, then I would buy. But until that happens, it's not going to occur for a sale. And keep in mind the operative word, where is it at? The camera's not going to help me do it here. It's feel. People feel value. They don't necessarily actually have an objective value. So it is going to be slightly subjective from person to person. All right, this is cap rate. This is very, very, very important to understand cap rate, because this is like the one number that controls basically the entire world economy, so to speak, because this is going to be expressing a rate of return. So net income divided by your price plus rehab, which we're not going to cover rehab yet, is going to be expressing your rate of return essentially. So it's relative to what you're using it for. For instance, you can say cap rate is NOI divided by value if you're selling. So if a property is bought for $100K with a $9K a year net, that is a 9% purchase cap rate. Right? And again, I'm saying purchase cap rate to specify it's on purchase, not on sell. So if it is a 9% rate of return, that is, and I turn around and list it with $10K a year, then $400K, mind you, then instead I'd be selling it as a 10% cap rate. So cap rate is a property's annual return without debt or income taxes, right? And it's just, what does the property itself do? Because again, we're talking about NOI, and NOI, the net income, is relative to or is specific to the property. So same thing here for cap rate. It is specific to the actual property. And it's the objective measure of a property's performance regardless of who buys or how they buy. So basically it means like if I buy it with a bank, it's not going to change the cap rate because we don't talk about debt, wherever it was saying it here, right here, right? We don't care about debt. We're talking about what does the property itself do. All right, fair market cap rate. Since net income divided by price equals cap rate, then also price equals NOI divided by cap rate, right? So we're just removing the formula here. So we said multiply both sides by price. That's all I did basically, right? So it's just like some algebra 1 there for you. So price is equal to NOI divided by a cap rate. If we are selling, we use value. If we're buying, we use price, because I talked about that right there, right? Price is what you're buying it for, value is what it's actually worth, and you are only able to sell stuff for what it's worth. So fair market cap rate is determined by the market. You don't come up with that yourself. Like you don't get to pick what that number is. The market determines that. So the cap rate at purchase price is not going to be necessarily equal to the cap rate at value, i.e. when you sell. So you find your fair market cap rate from comparable properties. This is the one item that you use as a comparable. Everything else is all mathematics, and it's very, very simple math. So you want to match it as accurately possible. If you cannot be accurate, just be pessimistic. All right, we'll get into it here a little bit more in a second. All right, hopefully everybody's like tracking along here. I know there's a very heavy stuff, but that's exactly what you guys wanted. So here we go. So we got a 100K property. That's 15K a year NOI is what we're just going to pretend is happening. So 15K divided by 100K equals 15% cap rate. Fair market cap rate is 10%. Let's just say that's the case, right? Because we looked around and we found a lot of other properties and we say, yep, it looks like it's 10%. So if we're selling our property at a 10% cap rate, then NOI divided by cap equals value. We're going to plug these in, or 15K NOI gets plugged in, divided by our cap rate, which is 10%, because I'm saying that the fair market cap rate is 10% because I did the research or whatever in this scenario. Then our value is actually 150K in this situation. So we've compressed the cap rate, and this is a really critical item to like understand what I'm talking about here. So if you're buying it for 100K, you have 15K a year net. Let's just say that's the case. If you're buying it at 15%, but you know that market is at 10%, then you can resell it at a 10%. And that's where you make your money. And this is the one equation that dictates all of multifamily. And the fact that people don't want to do division one time is literally the reason why there's nobody that works in this space. It is insane because most people just don't think in terms of division. They think in terms of addition and subtraction. So it's a very simple formula right here. Again, all these slides are going to be available online. Everybody can have them here afterwards for free. You can also compress it even further, right? So in theory, you could make it worth a 7% cap rate. So let's just say you take your 15K net divided by a 7% cap rate, because I do something to make it worth a 7% cap rate, which I'll get into on how to do that in a second. If that was the case, then I would be able to sell it for 214K. So mind you, this is a 100K property that we can then turn around and sell for 214K. And I didn't even talk about rehab. And we didn't even change the net income. We literally just modified the cap rate because we bought it at a whatever cap rate, and we turn around and sold it at fair market cap rate of 10%, or we continue to operate on the property and make it worth 7%. So that is cap rate compression. That is the critical mechanic on how all this stuff works. So how it matters, let's say the two properties are the exact same, but property B is way harder to run. So property A is a 9% cap rate. Property B has to have a higher return, right? That just makes more sense, right? So since buying a operating real estate is more work, sorry, I got a clerical error in there. The cap rate should be higher because it is more work, unless there's some other reason that we can get into here a little bit, like risk control or something else. But assuming they're the exact same, if one of them is more work, it should be having a higher rate of return. So here's a quick example here on rate of return for different asset types. So savings account, very low return. Control, you don't have a lot. It doesn't take you hardly any time to do anything in order to add money in your savings account. And it's very, very low risk because it's usually FDIC insured. A managed fund, a little higher. Long-term stocks, usually a little more stable. Short-term stocks like day trading, which I highly don't recommend because that's silly. That's going to be, you're starting to creep up there, but your risk is going up a little higher. So if property A and B are the exact same, B has to have a little higher. And hopefully this makes sense when I put it in this chart, why it has to have a higher rate of return. So why would you want to do the exact same amount of work and get paid not as much, right? So don't do that. So fair market cap rate. Here's more math formula stuff. So just bear with me here. Red boxes, by the way, are going to be for price and greens for value. So if you are buying at a 100K and you have 15K or 12K gross, let's just say 3K expense, that's a 25% expense ratio, OPEX. Then your NOI, let's call it 9K per year. So then your purchase cap rate is going to be 9%. That's at purchase, you're buying it for 9%. But if we are selling at an 8%, then we run the formula backwards, right? So let's just say we are able to sell it at an 8% because I maybe make the property really easy to run for the next guy because I do something to improve it, like, put a better tenant in there or something. Then I would be able to sell it for higher. So by just changing that 1% there from 9 to 8, again, I have to justify being able to sell it at 8 and I have to actually sell it at 8%. I can then turn this 100K into 112K, right? So there's a winner in this one. So I just made $12,500. All right, quick concept review. This is a expanded view. This is the exact same as this. These are the big categories, the high level. This just has a little bit more nuts and bolts. It's not that much more complicated, right? I'm just saying here's the rents, here's all the expenses, right? But this is going to be like your standard type of layout that you're going to want to do every time. Again, all these slides are available. All right, know all this stuff inside and out. And if you don't, you need to go back and really make sure you look at this on the slides later on when they publish the link. So otherwise you're gonna have a mud hut for knowledge set, and that's not very good. So I know a lot of people that have mud huts, so to speak, and they just can't build past a certain point because they didn't spend a lot of time on their foundation. So slide deck link is all right there. Don't skip ahead, but yes, you can go ahead and scan it if you want to. That will take you to the website and it will have everything on there for free. All right, I can go back real fast. Just give me an extra second. What's up? Yeah. Well, it's gonna be a private. Technically, it's a private link, but so it'll be at the end here. So you'll want to type it in. It's not like you can't navigate to it normally. I got it hidden because it's early access. So everybody's welcome for early access. All right. So we talked about lots of ways how we can improve property value. So here's the big three, right? These are the big three that you're going to use every single time. Pretty much the only three, honestly. Anybody have an idea for what the big three are? Best 3 ways to improve property value. This is like math related stuff too, by the way. Maybe that's a single family. So I use the term nowadays, single family mindset, I suppose, right? So if we're looking at just the financial sheet, just the finances, that's it. What are 3 value add levers? And I'll give you a hint and let you look at this real fast. Lowering the expenses, that is one of them. I don't want to give away the next thing though. What's another one? Increasing rent. So you got increased gross income, so that's occupancy, can also be another way to do it. You don't necessarily have to increase rent. You can just fill in the remaining units. That's something that I pride ourselves in doing, is that we fill everything first and then we increase rent. That way we don't just give people a hard time. And then also we stay on our market rent. Also decrease expenses. So that's going to be stuff like billing back utilities is an easy way to do it as well. So it ends up being cheaper for everybody, and I'll explain that in a second. So that's one way to do it as well. And then get rid of wasteful expenses. Sometimes you're just paying for stuff you don't need. All right, what's that third one? Anybody? No, it's just from it. Well, again, you're just looking at a spreadsheet like this, right? There's a better hint. All right, last one is compress your cap rate, like we're talking about. That is the big one. So if you make it easier to run, then you can justify selling it for easier, right? Because I talked about, it's like, why would you want, if A and B are the exact same, but B is harder to run, then B has to be a higher rate of return. Similarly, if A is easier to run, then should be worth, or A can have a lower rate of return. So if you just make it really easy for the next guy, basically. So you can do that. You can also buy it at a discount is a really simple way to do it, of course, by buy it at a 15% cap rate. But really, it's just make it easier to run for the next guy. That's it. If you do that, like, you will be able to justify having a lower cap rate. And everybody forgets about compressing the cap rate, so they'll do all the stuff like 1 and 2, but they don't actually like add management, or they don't like add systems or keep track of the rent roll or add some minor things that might improve the community or the property or whatever. So yeah, compress the cap rate. But again, you got to justify it. You can't just arbitrarily sell it for lower. All right. So now we're going to talk about different scenarios in the future. So pro forma is the typical term that you'll see out there, and that's Latin for sake of form. Why that means future state, no idea, but it means future state, right? And I use it in the terms of like scenarios. There's multiple possible future states you could have. So you could have year 1, year 2, etc. And I use the terminology like this. This is pretty standard if you ever see it on a financial sheet. You'll see stuff like BOY, which is beginning of year, or EOY, which is end of year, end of month, etc. And then I use something I call nuclear scenario, which is a future of nuclear holocaust basically for the property. So you just want to make sure it can also survive that. That's just something I do personally. So I use color codes like this. Feel free to do whatever you want, but if you have a lot of information on a page, it gets a little tough to figure out what's what unless you color code. So this is the ones that I found to be very useful. So it flags the bright colors, so it's like, hey, look here, and then also, hey, we don't know this, i.e. we got to research it. And then everything else I just kind of keep a little more muted. I know it seems like really minutiae. It's like, why do you care about the colors? But if you're staring at a spreadsheet and it's just everything's bright colors, it's not very easy to read. So numbers that can change over time are going to be cap rate, so you can make it easier to run, add management, etc. Standardized rent is another way to do that because you have less people that complain about like, well, my neighbor pays more or less than me and I'm disgruntled now, right? So you can just solve a lot of issues if you standardize all the rents. You can also change the rent, for instance. So if 2 units are the exact same in every way, then the newest one is a good indicator of what market rent is. Usually market rent tends to go up. And then again, you want to standardize for everybody, just it's most fair. So like, there's no reason to give somebody like a unfair treatment or special treatment and give them, $500 less per month just for no reason. And then finally, it's going to be expenses as well. So expenses we typically call 5% year over year, right? And then taxes and insurance, though, can jump a lot. So you want to be kind of pessimistic on those when you can. So here's what this looks like on a calculator. Oh, I'm sorry, just kidding. That comes in a second. All right, so utility bill back for tenant is another one that can change, right? So I was talking about expenses, right? So that's for expenses, but a key one that a lot of people miss for expenses is by doing utility bill back. So a tenant uses less electric if they're the one paying for it, right? They are not going to be as wasteful. So the total net amount of cost is going to be less. So here's a good example. If the landlord pays for the utility bill, let's call it $800 a month rent, $200 of utilities. So the landlord's paying for that. Then the landlord will end up getting $600, and the tenants will end up paying $800 for the rent, right? So the landlord's only getting $600, the tenant pays $800. But if the tenant pays the utility bill, the landlord would actually be willing to drop it for the rent because if you notice that utility bill just got cut in half because maybe they're not, just leaving the lights on all the time because the tenant's going to have a little bit more responsibility for themselves. As a result, the landlord is actually okay to say, hey, I'll do a little cheaper rent, or at the very least not increase rent. So landlord gets $700, tenant pays $800. So if you notice, the tenant pays the exact same either way, so you're not hurting the tenant necessarily, because the landlord should drop it down to whatever fair market rent is or not increase further. So the net cost is the same to the tenant, but the landlord can actually profit a little more. Or you can tip the scale the other way where the tenant can technically profit. Whatever's fine. It's just, the long story short, don't let the tenants do it because they will Bitcoin mine. I swear to God, that happens all the time. So they will just let that run nonstop. They will leave that hose running into their backyard pool and just let it overflow and not care. And they're going to run sprinklers all the daggum time if you are the one paying for it as the landlord. Tenants should not pay, or tenants need to pay for their own utilities. Otherwise, they just leave the heat on all the time or whatever. So it's very, very wasteful. So hopefully that makes sense on utility bill back. You're not an evil landlord if you bill back. It's actually better for everybody at the end of the day because it's just cheaper for everybody. So, and the only guys that win is the utility company, which is a monopoly anyway, and we hate them. So, all right. This is going to be a lot. I want you to really focus on what I'm looking at on the screen here because, again, I want you to remember the main categories, right? So you got your gross, you got your expense, you got your net, you got your cash flow, and you got your fair market value. That's the ones in gray here. Everything else is just stuff that feeds into those values. So again, our gross, let's just say it's 34,000-ish, expense is 11,000-ish. That means our OPEX is going to be 34% roughly. And then our, by the way, everybody make sure you're on mute. Our cash flow, for instance, is going to be our net income minus our mortgage. Let's see what else we got here. Yeah, and then we have our fair market cap rate at 9.5%, and then we're going to call that a fair market value of about $250,000, right? So assuming we bought it for $250K up here, then we are technically losing $8,000 of value, technically. However, we're going to run it through some pro forma scenarios. And again, this is just a made-up property. So we'll call it on day one. We're going to change a few things. You can see why I use the color codes here. So I'm just going to guess that the taxes, which were previously marked as 0, let's say I was not able to research that, then I'm going to call it about $125 per month. So that's $1,000 a year roughly, a little more. Our management, we're going to install management on day one. So that's a 10% rate. So that's 10% of your gross income. Let's see what else here. Redundant trash cans and dumpster. That's crazy. Why would we have both? So we're going to get rid of the trash cans and we're just going to have the dumpsters. We're going to bill back the electric on day one. And yeah, let's see what else. So our OPEX jumps up from 34 to 38%. So that means 38% of our income goes towards expenses. So our cash flow will actually technically drop a little bit too. But we just made this whole thing a little easier to manage, right? So I think now we can actually justify saying, hey, it is a little simpler because now we got rid of some crap that we didn't need. And then we also added management, so that's way less work for the next guy. So it is approximately the same valuation between current and day one. So you're not really like costing anything extra to the property that much. Slightly lower cash flow. But here's why all this is important. Because when we decide to scale this property, we're going to take it to end of year one. That's EOY1. So our market rent, we're going to add 6% on top. So let's just say, I'm just assuming the market rent is going to continue upwards. And mind you, market rent I'm assuming is like $1,200, maybe the unit rent's like $1,000. So we're still under market rent. So we're going to bump this guy up to $1,100. Again, market rent's like $1,300-ish. So we're going to bump this guy up to $1,100. This guy up to $11,500 or $11,500 rather, $11,500, and then $10,500. Right, so we're doing some like moderate increases. Again, if market rent is $1,300, these guys are still getting a good deal. 5% add for your taxes. I'm just guessing on those, so I highlight in yellow. Insurance, I'm going to tack on another 5%. Trash cans, it's redundant, and that's already gone, so we got rid of that. Dumpster, 5%, etc. Right? But now look at our OPEX. Oh, and we build back the sewer too, and then we also would build back the water. So our OPEX would now shoot all the way down to like 16%. Right? So that means our property would then shoot up to about $500,000. In 1 year, we just doubled the value of the property in this scenario. Right? So that's about $250,000 profit. Pretty easy. And then we do it again in year two. And we can clean up some things a little better, maybe get a little better management, get them at a better rate. So instead of 10%, we'll get them at 9% rate. And then all the rents are standardized. So now, because they're all standardized, we're going to have less tenant complaints. Because there's less tenant complaints, easier to run. Because it's easier to run, now I'm going to call it an 8.5% cap rate down here. So now we'd say our value is about $576,000. So in case anybody noticed, the majority of profit is in year one. You go from about $250,000 purchase price to about $500,000 value, but then you go from $500,000 to $570,000 in year two. So most of that value add is typically going to be in year one, maybe year two if it's a huge project. All right, and then this is like the nuclear holocaust scenario basically. So what you want to look for in this is can you survive, which I'm blocking the camera here, so let me, there we go. All right. So our cash flow would be like negative $74 a month. So that's like, can we survive the nuclear winter, so to speak? The answer is yes. We can survive paying $74 a month. So that is essentially what we are looking for is, can we survive at all? Not necessarily do we resell it, but because the actual resale value, which I'll show you again, resale value would be like $124K. So we would lose a lot of money if we sold, but we're not going to sell in that type of scenario. We're going to just weather the storm. All right. Man, I'm running close on time here, so I'm going to speed it up. There's a lot of stuff to get through. I hope everyone's learned. All right. Level 1, underwrite. You ballpark everything. Level 2, underwrite. You estimate everything. Level 3, underwrite. You prove everything. Right? This is the system I use. There's not like a defined system out there. This is just the system I created, I come up with, and I call it level 1 through 3. And when you are learning, you should do all levels because you got to pretend like you're actually buying the thing. Otherwise, you're going to get really good at level 1, but you're not going to have a clue on how to do level 3. So you got to practice all the way through every single time. So why do we do these? Oh, and by the way, if you, like I said, make sure to practice. Otherwise, you're not going to be very good at doing like a level 3. So why do we do it like level 1, 2, 3? Is because level 1 is your very fast assessment of a property. Is it even worth my time to continue further? Right. Level 2 is if I apply a little bit more realism, is it still a good deal or is it just totally BS? And then level 3 is you're ready to buy, so now you better have some freaking some pretty good quotes all the way across. All right, so level 1 underwrite. Here's what it looks like. Gross minus 30 to 40% OPEX. All this is on the slides again, by the way, for download. Pro forma value minus current value equals your profit. And I'll show you this for level 1 here in a second. Level 2, market research for cap rate and rent, line item. Make sure you do everything properly. Include expenses that aren't present but probably should be, and also include your rehab at this point in time. And then level 3 is actually prove everything. So now you're getting like sources, quotes, actual rent unit by unit. You're getting really in the weeds on this, but you don't need to launch right into level 3 right off the start. That's what everybody does wrong, I think. So and it accounts for everything basically. So rent unit by unit, full market rent data, everything. Like you really know what you're talking about at this point. So level 1 underwrite looks like this. This looks like a lot, but it's really simple. You got your future gross minus your OPEX, which again, we're going to just call it like 30%, divided by your future cap rate. So this is all dictating what is your future value, minus your current gross, minus your current OPEX, minus divided by your current cap rate. So it's just saying future value minus current value. That's it. That's all you're doing. You're supplying different numbers because your future cap rate isn't going to equal your current. Your future gross isn't going to equal your current. Your future OPEX isn't going to equal your current. But otherwise, you just figure out the value for both, which we already did earlier, and we already know how to do it. So pretty straightforward. And then, of course, subtract out the rehab. So this does not even account for any of the cash flow. This is just super, super simple. So because I'm just assuming all the cash flow is going to go fixing stuff, like whatever the stuff is. And if you end up with extra cash flow, yay, good for you. Estimate your future gross too, by the way, for looking at similar units online, and you're going to want to be pessimistic, so use the cheapest. And you're going to estimate your OPEX and cap just kind of by gut feeling. I got a table for that here, right here. So take a quick look at this real fast. And this is just general guidelines on what numbers to use if you're looking at something. All right, I'm going to go ahead and press forward because I got to run here in a second. On to the next page of the exact same slide deck. All right. Okay, so OPEX, cap rate, and then I got some modifiers on there as well, right? Because it's like if it's a better deal, worse deal, harder to work, easier to work, bigger market, lower, smaller market, etc. So these are just guidelines though. So just actually try to figure out what the real numbers are. But if you wanted to do for level 1 underwrite, this is the fastest way to underwrite a property in like 30 seconds, basically. All right, we're gonna do this very quickly. So just one person at a time. Actually, here's how I would like to do it. Is alphabetically, everybody that's in here, just come off mute. So we'll start with Aaron Berry, that is. So Aaron Berry, quick question and one quick answer. What is the 3 main groups in syndication? All right, fair enough. That is general partner, limited partner, and debt partner. But the debt partner is not really actually a partner. All right, Akbu. What's your percent rate of return if you are only a general partner? No, what is your percent return? Infinite, because you got no money in the deal. All right, Ben, this one's for you. What are the 3 types of leverage? Hold on. There you go. Yep, there's a big 3. Capital times skill. Other types of leverage. Brand, content, relationship. Sorry, we'll get to the next one here in a second. Brian, you're up next. There's a whole lot of other ones. Why does it make sense to partner with people? Chase. Or Brian, I'm sorry. All right, I'll go ahead and answer that for him. Skill leverage, basically, right? So higher efficiency. There's less time spent overall, and it's just better for everybody. All right, what is NOI and what is OPEX? Chase. Man, you guys have crushed my dreams. Yep, but the actual formulas for it is going to be, which that's on me for not saying what is the formula for it, is gross minus expense, and that's measured annually. OPEX is expense divided by gross. All right, I'm going to fly. Yep. Can't. Sorry, I'm on a tight timeline, so this is actually mute the whole time. Yeah, unfortunately not. I will be back in here later, though. I got to go pitch this over in RA Rev here in just a second. So, okay. So cap rate. is your NOI divided by your price minus rehab, also known as your NOI divided by value. I got more questions on here, so I'm just going to show you the answers real fast. Right? Price is not equal to value. A and B, if they're the same in all aspects, but one's harder to work, then cap rate has to have a higher one up for the one more problematic. You increase your gross, you decrease your net, or your expenses, I'm sorry, that's a clerical error, or compress your cap rate. So that's the three big ways to modify value. If all your units are rented for the exact same, and market rent is like $10.50, then you should probably rent like 11. Or I'm sorry, you should probably rent like 1,000, right? Because you want to be less than fair market value, and you already know that you can rent for 1,000 because they're all the exact same. So just standardize the rents. That's like the easiest way in order to get your comp, so to speak, because they're like internal comps. Easiest way to compress cap rate, add management. And then 3 levels on the right is going to be 1, 2, and 3, which is ballpark, estimate, and prove. All right, I want everybody to scan this. This is an awesome baller tool that I just created yesterday, and it will literally generate a report on stuff, that whatever it is that you need. There's a link right there. So I call this Auto DD. So if you scan it, it will tell you all the like information for that property in that local like region or county or whatever. So it will give you disaster data. It'll give you like the legalities of, is it legal to wholesale here? Because we got to look out for everything else. And this is all totally free, and it's all on the website. So just go right there, $0.landlord.com/resources/AutoDD. If you need to, you can scan that on the screen. And there's a feedback link on there too. I want everybody to take a picture of this if you want, because that's all the QR codes. So we got bootcamp dates. We're running that every day this week. If you're going to be doing, if you want day 2, you have to invite 5 more people, right? Hopefully me explaining all this stuff has helped you guys out a lot. So turn around and help me back out. Try and invite some people in here if you think this stuff is invaluable. Then you can get in for day 2. So there's an invite tracker bot that will track it. You have to right click on the server and create the invite link yourself. You can't just send them the website or anything. You have to actually invite them to get credit directly. And then we do a review on Wednesdays. So I got practice problems on the website. You will want to take a picture of this for the URL. So it's bootcamp/FC, because that is not normally available on the website. That's exclusive to that URL. So you have to have that URL to get to that page. And that is the slide deck for everything on here. I also have a practice problem, which is hopefully going to be very beneficial for you guys. So if you do that, you will understand how to do everything that we talked about in here. Yeah, man, that was a tough hour. That was really, that's a lot of stuff to get through. So I will see if I can trim out some things and maybe move it around to different days. So I wish I could have time for questions. I will be back in here tomorrow for networking hours, which is going to be at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So go ahead and join in here for sure, and make sure to go use that Auto DD tool that is available on the website. So, but if nothing else, then I appreciate everybody for showing up. Hopefully you learned a lot. Please fill out the form for feedback, because I really would like to hear your input on this stuff. So that's all I got for now, guys. Appreciate it.